That's actually, I just want to say, or do a little tangent on that with the Smith side of the Mars complex is that when we're dealing, the Smith side doesn't get talked about enough. A lot of astrology, oh god, this is irritating. A lot of astrologer, there's this period of time where astrologers are like, there's a missing planet named Vulcan, right? That's planet X, it's Vulcan, that's where the Hephaestus archetype is. It's like, no, the Hephaestus archetype is using like heat to forge and melt metal and turn it into, it's Mars, right? But when we're talking about our sense of personal power, that has to be forged. You know, a person doesn't come into life just, I'm powerful and I know exactly how to use it and it's great. Like, there's no warrior tradition has the idea of the Messiah. You know, like the warrior is always forged. You know, and there's a lot of stern hammer blows and extremely hot experiences that make the metal malleable. And I don't know, there's just this idea that I think comes from a general ignorance and disconnect from the martial sphere. That people think they're just going to discover their power and it's going to be totally like awesome and ready-made, and they don't have to do anything, like the pulling the sword from the stone, right? Which is actually a king myth or a solar myth. You already are who you are. Like the solar energy is already there. You can just rediscover that. The martial is about forging the tools that you need to affect your environment.
It's more, and it's an infernal, isn't it? It's definitely like kind of.
That's great. Let's talk about Mars.
Well, I was gonna bring this up. I don't know if you mind.
Let me.
Kane totally like fits into that martial profile. He's a blacksmith. Yeah. He's a wanderer. He's a sorcerer. He's like this infernal, just like fuck you. I murdered my brother. Now I wander to the moon.
Perfect. So yeah, let's talk about Mars and the infernal.
Okay.
So in a lot of stories, especially the stories people tell these days, hell is a giant soul forge, right? It's a really hot place. So if we go back to the earliest associations between deities and planets, right? We're in Babylon, right? We're in that area. And they actually had the tightest association between planets and deities. It wasn't like, yeah, that deity is connected to that planet. It's like, no, that deity lives up there. That's him. He's looking at you with his red eye. Mm-hmm. And so Mars for those folks was Nurgle, right? Nurgle, like one of, you know, he's a god of war and fire and darkness. And he's actually the lord of the hellfire. Yeah. There was hellfire in the Babylonian underworld. How did he become the lord of the hellfire? He fought his way into the underworld and basically put his sword to the throat of the underworld goddess and was like, make me your consort. Right? And so we see the very forceful, it's very martial. Yeah. You know, like to become king of hell, but it wasn't hell, it's not the Christian hell, right? But to become lord of the underworld by holding the underworld goddess at sword point is pretty martial. And then to be lord of the fire. And so they would look up and see the little red thing in the sky and be like, yeah, that's the lord of the hellfire. He brings the storm of battle. And so yeah, and especially in the Christian West, the martial instincts are relegated to hell primarily. Mm-hmm. They're like, I'm going to do this on my own, and like violence is a necessary part of creation. Like these insights are not celestial or angel approved. Although one might argue that a lot of the depictions of the Archangel Michael are very resonant with Mars, if you want to kind of take it up to the more celestial level. But Mars' sort of natural resonance is a little lower and a little hotter than that.
Yeah, you're right. That point about the martial gods always have to be forged. It seems like the beautiful, peaceful gods that are all badass in that way are always born that way. And like a Krishna ball, they're born and everyone loves them forever, and they're
Jesus,
and they're majestic and wonderful, and they all go through their little trials and stuff, but they never really have to do much.
Yeah, they just have to hold true to their inherent goodness.
Yeah.
What about Mithras though? Because he's a martial god, but he's just like born the light of the world.
I would say he's a solar god.
He's totally a solar god.
I think he's.
But he's just got some martial aspects.
Well, the sun is a big hot thing.
Yeah.
And so the sun and Mars are both hot.
Yeah.
You know, they're both fiery.
Okay.
And so it's easy. It's a little easy. if you're analyzing a god or a situation where you're dealing with like the power of flame, are the myths centered in the battles and the interactions, or are they centered on the being itself? You know, Mars is sort of like, Mars is his sword. If that makes sense. He is the extension of the self. Whereas with the solar, it's more centered and anchored in the middle of being. That makes sense.
And the martial solar gods are mostly the leaders in the troops.
Absolutely.
You know,
Right. They're the center of the army. There's a couple different systems of astrology equate the planets with different stations within society. Sun is the king, Mars is the general. Right. The general is still really important, but he doesn't run the whole society. He's just like, he just comes in and figures out how to deal with the society's interactions with things that are external to it that are a problem.
Yeah, and he's totally like beyond the society as well. Just
exactly.
Like Mars is.
And the warriors are, and a lot of societies have warriors as like the kind of outcasts. Like they're not allowed to mingle with the normal people because they're destructive. But you can export that destruction.